Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Matt Jarbo. Welcome back to another episode of PODIO Commentary. Today we're going to be talking about Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. I love this movie. I adore this movie. I hadn't seen it in a really long time up until last night, but the first time I saw this movie will always stick with me because it's always one of those, it's one of the best moments I have with my mom. I know that seems kind of weird to say, but let me just kind of get that out of the way. When I was 6, and I mean like newly minted 6 years old, right? My birthday's March 26th. March 30th, 1988 is when Beetlejuice came out. My mom had seen the trailers on TV. She wanted to go see it. She figured it was okay for a 6-year-old to go see. So we went to the theater and we watched the movie, and we loved the movie. And so much so that she wanted to go right back in and watch it again, but she didn't have the cash on her at the time. So we went back the next day and saw the movie again and watched it countless times on home video over the years. Now, granted, the older I got, more movies came out, the more I was working in movie theaters and everything else. So as much as I loved Beetlejuice, it was one of those ones that kind of took a bit of a back seat, especially when talking about Tim Burton movies. When I was going through film school, I watched Batman 89 again, and Batman 89 has a lot of issues. Like, there's a lot of problems with that movie on like a on a filmmaking level, just little things that were kind of weird about the edit. And so in my brain, I kind of chalked it up to being like, well, Tim Burton was still kind of early. This was only like his third or fourth movie, this being Batman. And then I'm like, all right, but Beetlejuice is kind of in its own place. And so when I went back to watch Beetlejuice again last night, I now showed it to my 6-year-old and my 5-year-old, who I was kind of curious to see what their reaction was. And I'll get to that here in a little bit. But Beetlejuice was like, it's a tightly made movie. It's a very well made movie. I couldn't really see any glaring issues at all with the film as I was watching it. Like, in my brain right now, if I'm going to give anything a 10 out of 10, and I do give a lot of movies a 10 out of 10, to be fair, because I just love them so much, Beetlejuice is absolutely a 10 out of 10. It is not only Tim Burton firing on all cylinders. Danny Elfman's score is amazing. And the cast is amazing. Catherine O'Hara is wonderful. Alec Baldwin, Geena Davis, Winona Ryder. I mean, of course, and Michael Keaton just, he's barely even in the movie. Like, you don't even really see Michael Keaton in the movie until halfway through. Like, that's like, it doesn't matter. Like, he's only in the film for the back half, and he's the villain of the story. You still just love everything about it. And watching this again as an adult, I'm so fascinated by the lore of that world, of the underworld, right? Or purgatory, or whatever it is. There's so much there that is just like ripe for storytelling. And I know Beetlejuice is coming out here in the next couple of weeks. My girlfriend and I are very excited to go and see it. But I just want to know more about that paranormal world. I thought it was like, there's little lines of dialogue about like people who become, who commit suicide, end up becoming civil servants in the afterlife. Okay. And the woman who's the receptionist in Juno's office, she's like, if I would have known now what I knew then, or if I would have known then what I know now, I wouldn't have done this. And she holds up her hands and she committed suicide. So we know more at that particular point in time. Never mind, Juno is such a great character, such just like a funny character who you would like to just kind of see follow around and like do civil servant work in the afterlife, for how weird and zany it would be, and just how like straightforward and bureaucratical she is. Like, it's really funny. She kind of has that vibe. I know I'm just totally diving right into this. She has that vibe of like the lieutenant in a buddy cop movie. Right? She does. She has that vibe of the lieutenant. Like, you need to get this done. I don't care how you do it. Just get it done, because I got the mayor on my ass, or something like that. Like, she just conveyed that in such a way that makes her character so much fun. Like, you love watching her on the screen. You want more with her. Sadly, the actress has passed away. Obviously, it's been almost 40 years since the movie came out, but it's just like, it's such a wonderful film filled with so many little, like, idiosyncrasies and little bits here and little snaps of dialogue and everything, with like, again, Catherine O'Hara is just wonderful. Just that opening line of like, I will go to the pits of hell and I will take you with me, like, freak out with Jeffrey Jones. And And the sad thing about watching this movie, to be fair, again, I'm just totally getting ahead of myself here, but the sad thing about this movie is like, I loved Jeffrey Jones back in the day, right? Like Mom and Dad Save the World, Ferris Bueller, fucking Howard the goddamn Duck. Okay, I'm a big Howard the Duck fan, and yeah, I'm gonna do a podio on it. And I'm just watching this, and I know he's like a bad guy. I know he's done some bad stuff, and it just sucks when there's actors that you like that are in those situations, and you're like, damn it, you stupid asshole. Like, why? You know what I mean? And it's not just him, it's a whole bunch of actors that are like that, unfortunately. But at the same time, it's like, I enjoyed him in the movie. I enjoyed everyone. Ortho, man. Freaking Ortho is great. Like, everyone is great in that movie. It's so iconic. It's so much fun. Like, I had such a blast watching it again as an adult and understanding it now, understanding how capitalistic it is, right? Like, it felt like an extension of Ghostbusters for being like a mid-'80s blue collar capitalistic movie. And that's kind of weird. I know it's the whole thing with like the end of the film with like the whole like, hey, let's build out the town and turn it into like some paranormal central thing in Connecticut and whatever. But it's like, it's very rooted in 80s capitalism and like postmodernism and like how clashing ideal. It's such a weird thing. Anyway, let's I'm going to go through the whole movie. But let's talk about how the movie was made. Obviously, PODIO commentary. I like to talk about how the movie was made. I like to talk about the critical scores, the box office, all that stuff, because I feel having some of that background information only makes the movie better, in my opinion. And so this is one that I love. So let's talk about the background of this movie. So after Tim Burton did Pee-wee's Big Adventure in 1985, which again is another just absolute classic film, he gained recognition as a promising director, and he began collaborating with Sam Hamm for Batman. However, despite Warner Brothers' willingness to fund the script's development, they were actually hesitant to fully greenlight Beetlejuice. Burton at this point in time became frustrated by a lack of creativity in the scripts that he was being offered, including one for a movie called Hot to Trot, but he became more interested in other projects, including, well, Beetlejuice. And Beetlejuice originally came from a partnership between Michael McDowell and Larry Wilson, who teamed up with an entertainment attorney named Michael Bender to form Pecos Productions. After developing the story, McDowell and Wilson then co-wrote the first draft, with Wilson taking credit for the story and production. Burton, familiar with McDowell and Wilson for their previous work together, liked their draft, but was initially unable to become involved due to other commitments. Now, one of the things people tend to think of is that Tim Burton wrote and directed Beetlejuice. Like, there's a lot of people that think that. There's also a lot of people that think that he wrote and directed Nightmare Before Christmas. Because there's a lot of movies that he did do that with, but ultimately it's kind of like Tim Burton's more of a director. Anyway, now the original screenplay for Beetlejuice was actually much darker and way less comedic. Because if you think about the movie now, it's very much like an Acme comedy, right? It's like an Acme cartoon. Now, the original script was way more graphic, like in the depiction of the Maitland's car crash, and a more sinister character for Beetlejuice, who was envisioned as a winged demon with murderous intentions and a desire for sex from Lydia, the teenager, rather than just marriage. Various versions of the script did explore different endings, including an exorcism ritual that destroyed Beetlejuice and transformed the Maitlands into miniature versions of themselves. I mean, there was that whole bit in the movie when they go and they find the room for lost souls, the souls that have been exorcised, and that's like a fate worse than death sort of thing. So I think that kind of held over from the original script, because that in most movies that would deal with this sort of thing, that would be like a plot device. That would be kind of like a setup, like, oh, this is where he's going to go at the end. This is how we get rid of him, is we have to do an exorcism. And that's like them setting up that particular aspect. And so I think that was definitely one part of the script. I mean, if that was like one of the original ideas that they'd worked on, to me, that makes the most amount of sense. Because in the movie, that room is just showing you parts of purgatory or the afterlife. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's just kind of there as like a warning of what could happen. It's ominous in the sense that this could be something that would happen to them, but it was never really thought of. You know, like even when Ortho gets the book, you think like, oh, that could be something. And maybe that ultimately was what they were trying to do when Ortho accidentally was reading from the Book of the Deceased or recently deceased and then trying to get them to come back. And what was happening to them was they were kind of being exercised to an extent. I don't know. That was never explained. And that's okay because it's still a great film. But that part's a little bit kind of funky. Anyway, despite some initial resistance from prominent executives at Universal who disparaged the script's weirdness and then ultimately questioned its value, the project found a home at Geffen Company. The script was then later revised by Warren Scarron, who toned down the graphic elements of Beetlejuice's sinister nature and introduced the concept of the afterlife as a complex bureaucracy, which is, again, like one of the most interesting elements of the movie, and then added musical elements to the ghostly hijinks. And who, you know, I mean, come on. If you ever hear, day, me's a 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 day, oh, daylight come and me one go home. Day. You know that song. You know exactly that scene. You probably know it beat for beat, shot for shot. You know that freaking scene, you know? And then the end of the movie, you know, like, come into the line, shake your body. I can't even, you know, whatever. Like, oh no, I believe you. Right. You know, the music, Danny Elfman scored. Like, this movie is firing on all cylinders with all of those elements, like 100%, just completely firing on all cylinders. And that's one of the reasons why it holds up nearly 4 decades later. It's like so goddamn good. So anyway, he also rewrote everything to like refine the limbo that traps Barbara and Adam, kind of adding new dimensions to the otherworldly aspects of the story. And there's a line in the movie where Beetlejuice talks about the sands of Saturn, right? Like, you went to Saturn and that's where the sandworm is. Because they never explain what that dimension is. They never explain what that plane of existence is. And that was always kind of weird. Again, like I'm saying here, you could write like a series, like this is where it should be a show. This is where Warner Brothers and Max and Casey Bloys from HBO should sit down with Tim Burton and should sit down with everybody involved, all the execs involved, and go, this is where we need to have a show, is set inside of the Beetlejuice mythos. What goes on in the afterlife? Have it be, you know, something going on and create an interesting mystery. Because what it looks like from the Beetlejuice 2 trailer is that Beetlejuice ended up getting a job as a civil servant and he's working down there for Juno or Juno's replacement, which I think is probably going to end up being Willem Dafoe's character. But just find a way to like explain what all of that is. You know what I mean? And like, I just want there to be more information because it's so freaking cool. And it was cool when I was a kid. As an adult with an even more active imagination, it's so much cooler. But let's talk about the casting of the film. So Tim Burton initially envisioned Sammy Davis Jr. as Beetlejuice. Think about that, right? Sammy Davis Jr., one of the Rat Pack. Sammy Davis, that's such a weird, I'm like, I have nothing to get Sammy Davis Jr., like not at all. But you know those sayings of like which actor killed a role so well that you could never see anyone else playing him? I mean, Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice is very iconic. I'd argue it's more iconic than him as Batman. That might be fighting words to some people, but that's fine with me. It's really good. There was other people such as Dudley Moore and Sam Kinison. Oh my God, Sam Kinison. Sam Kinison as, okay, listen, maybe I'm wrong. Sam Kinison. Sam Kinison would I don't, okay, maybe I'm not right. I mean, like, who doesn't love Sam Kinison? If you don't know who Sam Kinison is, go look up Sam Kinison. May he rest in peace. That motherfucker was hilarious. It's just, he's so good at screaming. But that would have also overpowered the scenes, I think. I don't necessarily think his chemistry with Adam Baldwin, or Alec Baldwin, sorry, different Baldwin I'm thinking of, with Alec Baldwin would have necessarily worked, you know. Keaton was able to bring that creep factor, the fun factor, the cool factor, you know, and kind of be like an 80s bad boy. Sam Kinison just would have been yelling and screaming the whole time. And again, I'm not really against it because I think it's great. But also, it was Geffen who had suggested Michael Keaton, which is great. But Tim Burton at the time was apparently unfamiliar with Keaton's work. But he then quickly persuaded him after seeing him in action, which makes sense because Keaton is great. And then they've worked together a couple times. For Lydia Dietz, he had auditioned Sarah Jessica Parker, which would have been weird, Brooke Shields, which would have been too posh, Lori Loughlin, I don't know, Diane Lane. I mean, don't get me wrong, like Diane Lane would have been okay, I think, but this is probably coming around like the Outsiders time, and she wasn't weird enough. But apparently Alyssa Milano was in the running up for this, and Alyssa Milano would have been okay. You know, Sam from Who's the Boss. You know, that would have brought a lot of people over. But Winona Ryder just kind of like nailed it for what she brought to the table. And this is actually based on the fact that he saw her in the movie Lucas, which that movie in and of itself, that's the one where Corey Feldman claims that Charlie Sheen sexually assaulted Corey Haim during the making of. There's a whole thing with that. But anyway, I don't think Burton knew about that at the time. I don't think he even knows about it now, to be honest with you. But anyway, he saw her performance in Lucas, and that's why he cast her. Angelica Houston was originally chosen for the role of Delia Dietz, but had to withdraw due to illness, leading to Catherine O'Hara taking on the part. Man, Angelica Houston. No, I'm just going to say no. And no dig on Angelica Houston, right? But like at that time, she did like The Witches, you know, and that was brutal, man. Her performance was wicked in that movie. And then, you know, coming off of that and doing like Morticia Gomez in both those films was wonderful. It was like impeccable casting. I don't think she could have brought the manic. I don't think she could have brought the manic obsessiveness and the ego that Catherine O'Hara brought to Delia Dietz. I just don't think she could have brought that. It's also funny to kind of juxtapose Catherine O'Hara from that role to then 2 years later playing like America's mom in Home Alone, right? It's such a weird thing. And I love Catherine O'Hara. Like I cannot wait to see her in Beetlejuice 2. So I just don't see Angelica Houston. I'm sorry. That just doesn't really happen for me. But apparently after that, like Burton has openly talked about how like it was very difficult and took a lot of effort to convince other cast members to join because they were kind of like unsure about the weird script. I mean, Robert Goulet is in the movie for like a little bit. You could pretty much just guarantee that even Robert Goulet is like, nah, I don't know. I'm not too sure. But they, you know, for what he was in, he was good. It was great. You know, we don't even know what happened to them at the end of the movie. That's always a funny part. So then they went off and they shot the movie, and they did this for $15 million. They shot Beetlejuice for $15 million, but granted, that was back in 1987. Still, though, that is wow. With apparently only $1 million allocated for visual effects, but they did a great job with what they had. It's easy to tell, like when they do the close-up shots of when they're on the model in the house, like this obviously just a soundstage, right? Like the grass always kind of intrigued me even as a kid. It just looked like the kind of grass that you would find in like a Lego set or something like toys would like kind of slide into it. And they just basically built these like little sets on a soundstage. And then they just shot around that. But you, in your mind, you are able to suspend disbelief enough to just ignore the entire black background because it was dark when they shot those things in the rooms. And then from there, they were able to just have that be a bit of the visual effects. And then if you look at like what Beetlejuice did, you know, at the end with like the carnival stuff was really basic. You know, it was really basic. It wasn't anything too crazy. And so, yeah, but I would argue the most money would probably go to doing the whole bureaucracy bit. And probably, again, all the makeup for all the other dead people and all the other different versions of dead people, like the cigarette man, the shrunken head guy, you know, like the voodoo priest, like all those guys, right? Or the witch doctor, that would be what it is. All those things. So there's like so much, like you can see they really got creative with it. And this is where Tim Burton shined back in the day, getting creative with very little. And I think that's probably what happened with Tim Burton over the years is like he got so used to just kind of like having it all built out in such a way that, you know, CG, and he had like huge budgets. And so that kind of maybe like didn't restrain him. And when you have constraint, you have to get creative. And I think that worked really well for this movie. Like I can't speak highly enough of it. I love it so freaking much. It's so good. Anyway, And then look, even though they had a ton of stop motion, replacement animation, prosthetic makeup, puppetry, blue screen effects, because back then everything was blue screen, not green screen. That didn't come until that didn't come until the end of the 90s. What was it? The Phantom Menace was shot on blue screen, not green screen. It came after that. Go watch some of the behind the scenes of the Phantom Menace and you'll see what I'm talking about. But yeah, green screen is what we use now, the chroma key, but back then it was blue. Go figure. Hollywood's advancements, right? Always little things that are pretty cool. But yeah, ultimately, there were disagreements about how they wanted to title the movie, because Warner Brothers was like, no, I don't know if Beetlejuice is going to work, because it's spelled Betelgeuse, right? But the movie's titled Beetlejuice. It's very odd when you start kind of looking at it that particular perspective. But anyway, Warner Brothers wanted to call the movie House Ghosts. Yeah, because people gonna flock to the theater. Hey, coming March 30th, 1988, come watch Warner Brothers' newest movie, House Ghosts, starring Mr. Mom's Michael Keaton. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. So stupid. Anyway, they apparently even considered calling it a joke title called Scared Sheetless, which, okay, that's pretty funny. Okay. But apparently it was Tim Burton who said this, but he said this in jest. The film's setting, the fictional village of Winter River, Connecticut, was brought to life through the outdoor scenes that they shot in East Corneth, Vermont, while the interior scenes were filmed at the Culver Studios in Culver City, California. And again, considering the fact that the vast majority of that was all done internally or done with interior shots, yeah, you can see they probably shot the most of it there. They shot it actually over a 3-month period from March 11th to June 11th, 1987. And then it was out in theaters 10 months later, right? Or 9 months later. Same thing happened actually with Tim Burton's Batman. They finished filming the movie in February 1989, and it was in theaters only a few months later. So fast turnaround around that point in time. It's crazy. Okay, so let me talk about the movie itself here for a little bit. I know I've already kind of jumped around here and there, but it really is just a good movie. It's a simple movie. It's got a 90-minute runtime, basically. It's very fast-paced. It's engaging and compelling, and you ultimately end up enjoying the main characters. Adam and Barbara, they are just a nice married couple. The opening with them in the house, we just want to spend our vacation together. We just want to be together, work on our individual projects, but just enjoy the time. And then you've got the woman coming over and she's like, you should really just sell your house because, a family should live here. You know what I mean? You can get a couple $100,000 for this place. That lady always bugged me the wrong way, because there's just because she's very much always trying to sell for herself, right? She's a realtor. She's an interior decorator. There's a whole bit with her when the Dietzes first buy the house where they're talking about the interior decoration as being terrible. Just god awful, gut the whole house. It's bad. And then she gives Lydia her card and she goes well, I also did the interior decoration for this house. So they can give me a call if they have any questions or needs or whatever. And you're she has no way of knowing what they were saying. We as the audience do. And that was our last interaction with the realtor. And that was okay, because basically it's just she acts sad. There's a scene where she, after the death, where she goes to the house with her daughter and she's out there, I guess, paying their respects. Right. But in my mind now, after getting to see the movie when I'm older, I don't think she was necessarily paying her respects as much as she was giving the appearance of paying her respects. I think she was also, eager to sell the house because they had no family. According to this idea, they had no family. They had no children. We don't even know who ultimately sold the house to the Dietzes. It was a couple months after they died. It was 2 months after they died, the house was sold to the Dietzes, which means that they worked very, very, very quickly. I bought my house 7 years ago and there was a 45-day escrow closing period, a month and a half. So it's she quickly, so this is what you have to realize. This realtor, She jumped on the ball on that as soon as they were dead, like before the bodies even had a chance to get settled into the ground. She was up there selling off that damn house, and like no one ever really talks about that. But that was, again, I think another maybe commentary on the capitalism of the 80s, right? Everything was go, 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 go. Let me sell, 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 sell. And maybe I'm overthinking that, but in my mind, that's kind of what I was thinking about last night. And then obviously, when the Dietzes come on in, and you have like this, like no real like backstory about who they are. They're from the city. This would be like New York. That Jeffrey Jones is like a businessman, or he's a pitch guy, an architect, maybe. Like we never really know what it is that he does. We know that Delia is an eccentric, a postmodernist sculpture artist who wants to, make a living doing that, and wants to be known for doing that, wants her artwork everywhere. So she's the center of attention. And, her artwork looks like something that like a child would make. And there's a scene that I love is like when they're moving into the house, and she's got one of the movers has one of her pieces of art, and she's like trying to explain to him what it is. And he's looking at her like, lady, I work with my hands for a living. Really? Like, what are you doing? And then she's like, well, just put it on the table. And he just sets it on the table, but like doesn't know how to set it up, doesn't know how to put it. So he just puts it there. And then there's like a look of incredulity in her face, and she just goes over and puts it the right way up. And that moment always kind of stood out to me. But even when I'm watching it last night with the kids, I was just kind of laughing, because it's like, you could tell she really does care about her art. No one else cares about her art, but she really cares about her art. She thinks that it's good. She will definitely put that above everything else. And then obviously we get Ortho. I love Ortho. He's just like one of those weird guys, interior decorator, designer from New York, loves the paranormal. There's a scene though kind of jumping ahead here, but when they go to the dinner scene right before the Deo, the Calypso song, there's like the one Asian woman that's there, and like Ortho starts talking about like the paranormal, and she goes, "Oh, is that what they're calling it now?" And I'm all like, "Oh, damn, she just called him gay." Like she just called him gay in front of everybody. Like there's some back and forth there. I mean, granted, they're friends, and it's probably like they're catty or whatever. Maybe they're not friends. I don't know, because she left with the other people that were from the city that were there. So maybe she wasn't, but they clearly knew each other, and they were just talking mad trash. But it's done in such a way that it's so subtle, and like you're just not going to get it. And then I'm older, and I'm realizing, like, oh yeah, this was the 80s, and it's like, sure, people were gay and everything, but was this like a reference on the AIDS epidemic, right? Because that was considered like a big problem back then. I mean, it was a big problem back then. It was massive, affecting the gay community. So is that like her being homophobic in that sense? Was that a commentary on I mean, I am most definitely entirely overthinking this, but that line stuck out to me last night as I was watching it. I thought that was just really interesting. But Ortho, stealing the book, doing the whole resurrection thing, reading from the book, that was part of the lore that I wish we would have gotten more from, because there's a joke in the movie about the handbook for the recently deceased reading like stereo instructions. And again, that's an 80s thing. That's an absolute 80s thing, getting all the stereo equipment coming in over from Japan, people having their home stereo systems. It was just like, that's the joke, right? These really big, thick manuals. Like, I think the best way to describe it, if you weren't around back then, and I was only a kid, so I only kind of barely remember, but like, think of like the way people understood that was kind of how they understand IKEA instructions. You're like, what the fuck is this? But that's a gag about that stuff. And again, the complex bureaucracy was part of the joke of that. But the older I get, the more I find bureaucracy fascinating for how the wheels of government turn and how it ends up dictating and controlling society. And so I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, this is interesting. Okay, like go back to the movie Jupiter Ascending. Yeah, I know, right? It's a deep cut from like 9 years ago. Not a good movie. But when they go in the middle of the movie and they have to go to the whole bureaucracy element part of it, that's where I thought the movie was the funniest. Because for some reason, bureaucracy is always like something we have to deal with. And when it's done in a way that's kind of interesting, you remember it. Like go back to 2005 with, was it the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? When Martin Freeman, they have to again go to the bureaucracy part and he goes like, I'm British, we know how to queue. Like that line was really funny because again, it's like, just bureaucracy in and of itself is something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. But if you can make it interesting, then people will pay more attention to it. And that's kind of where we are. I mean, look at how politics now is a spectator sport in our culture. This is kind of pulling from that to some extent. Maybe I am just too deeply overanalyzing this movie, but I find so many elements of it to be deeply, deeply fascinating. If I was going to say one element of it was a little bit kind of iffy, I'm going to talk about Lydia Dietz as a character. I like Lydia. I feel like her connection with Adam and Barbara was really good. Her disassociation with her parents makes sense because she's a teenager. The whole goth emo thing from back in the day kind of made sense. But there's that part where she was like, I'm going to kill myself because she wants to be with Adam and Barbara because she like identifies with them more. Like they're more of like the parental type she wants. And they obviously want a kid. The problem though is because due to the quick runtime of the movie, that relationship isn't entirely explored. Like they care. We know that they care. We see that they care. But there wasn't a lot there that really kind of like solidified that relationship. And I don't know if that's entirely necessary, but again, like the older I get, the more I just kind of enjoy these interpersonal scenes where people are building relationships. I like to see that almost kind of more than anything else now, because it's something to kind of like, you know, I can bite into, I can sink my teeth into, I can love it. That's like my only real complaint with the story is really just that, because there's just not any time for those scenes to really play out in such a way that's going to make their sacrifice, or well, their attempted whatever with Lydia, meaningful. You know, there's this scene where they're told by Juno, get the Dietzes out of your house. And maybe I misheard it. Maybe I gotta go back and watch that part again. Maybe I got distracted. I still don't fully understand why they need to get them out of the house. Maybe I just missed that part. But they decide to do the whole like face stretch thing and they, you know, all that stuff. And then they look like horrible, crazy demons. And then they have this real heart to heart conversation about like, I don't want to do this. I just want to like be with Lydia, you know? And then like, yeah, I know we should just like, we should let them live there. And we should just do it. You know, we should coexist sort of thing. But they're doing this with their faces completely distorted. And it's such a funny scene because you can't see the emotion on their face, but they're having very deeply emotional conversations. It's just like, it adds to like the comedic element of the movie. Like I said earlier, this is kind of like a Looney Tunes cartoon. This is very Acme cartoon inspired. And that was, you know, again, that's a great scene and it's a good emotional scene leading up to the finale, obviously. But again, would have loved to have seen more scenes with them. However, let's talk about the star. Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice is such a great character because he really is a piece of crap. He really is a piece of crap. We don't know much about him. We don't really need to know much about him, right? We just know that he was Juno's assistant and then he decided to go rogue and become a freelancer. And he is just like completely a degenerate pervert and all that stuff. And he does it great. He does a great job with it. What I love too is when he gets distracted by the whorehouse and he's like completely goes over there. And then Barbara's like, Adam, why did you build that? It's like, I didn't build that. And then Juno's like, that was my idea to get rid of him, to distract him. And that was one of the reasons why I love Juno as a character was like, I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do this because this guy's a moron and he's dangerous. And he, you know, you guys are stupid for dealing with him in any conceivable fashion. And then, of course, he ends up having to be the person to save the day, but he does it under the guise of marrying Lydia because he wants to get back out, you know, into the real world. And what's so funny about that is like in the original script, he wanted to have sex with her and that's weird. She's a teenager, you know, but then, of course, like now he's going to get married to her. And in my brain, I'm thinking of when she was with Dennis Quaid in Great Balls of Fire when they were cousins and she was like 13 hooking up with him. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of weird. So it's like, at least now she's, I think that came out before. I don't remember if that came out before or after that movie. But in this case, you know, there's no like, it kind of just came across like just like a transactional marriage. Like I'll get married to you. I get to come on out. That's about it. right? There's no discussion of like, we're going to have an intimate relationship, which of course she's a teenager and you shouldn't have those conversations. And I'm glad that they didn't. Because even though it might have been implied, it was never directly stated. And the fact that it's never directly stated doesn't take away from the comedy of the scene, right? Or the comedy from the end of the movie. There is no sexualized nature where Beetlejuice wants to sleep with Lydia. And that's really good. Because if that was the case, they wouldn't have been able to do a 2 or 3 season cartoon show that premiered the next year. Because remember, guys, if you were around during the 80s and early 90s, everything had a cartoon show. It's just how it was. So anyway, Beetlejuice just coming on out at the very end and doing all like the Acme stuff and everything else. Never mind the whole thing where he was like doing the snake bit and everything with the people in the beginning, or in the middle of the movie. He comes out now and he's just kind of funny, does a carnival bit, gets rid of the people, then wants to go and bring out the marriage. And I just liked it when people are trying to say Beetlejuice, 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 and he just keeps using magic or his powers and gets rid of Geena Davis, sends her to the moons of Saturn, I guess, or somewhere on Saturn, where she rides a sandworm and then eats him. It's just a weird thing from where the movie ends. It kind of just ends abruptly. And I feel like there's a lot of movies out there, and even now, even modern films, that don't quite understand how to wrap up a story in the third act. And it's not that they needed to wrap it up here. They really didn't. It's an idea where you just needed to have a way to get rid of him and get him back into the underworld. Like, that's it, right? Save the day sort of thing. Everyone comes together, kumbaya. They all live happily ever after. That's the point. And it worked. They got rid of him in one fell swoop, saved the day. Then, was it 6 months later, Lydia's in school. She's a happy, non-emo kid anymore, which I think is a commentary on the whole concept of like a 2-parent household, but that's a whole other conversation. And then, she gets an A on her math test, but a C on science, and gets to do the whole like song at the end. And what I love about that is they're the ones, like Adam and Barbara, are waiting for her to get home. And they're happy that she got the grades. And then you get to the parents, and they're up in the office, and he hears the music, and the dad's like, oh, I guess Lydia got an A in math. And then here comes Delia with the Beetlejuice sculpture and scares him. And she's like, oh, he likes it. Because now if you notice, her entire demeanor changed. She's not wearing all black. She is wearing black pants, black hat, but she's got a white shirt on. And that's showing a change in her character. That's really showing a change in how she's accepted living in Connecticut, how she's connecting with her art. That it has purpose, it now has meaning, and now has a vision. Everything else, all of her sculptures were just kind of like, they were baseless. They were shapeless. They had nothing to say. They were meant to be modern, but a lot of postmodern art is shit. Let's be fair. But her sculpture of Beetlejuice as the snakehead, that was something to say. That was emotion. That was feeling. That was a change in her character. That was an advancement in her character. Where like the dad gets his peace and quiet. She gets her motivation to sculpt. Lydia has a mom and dad figure in the ghosts that are helping her with science and homework and everything else. And she has a good relationship with them. She's no longer emo. She's no longer goth. She's no longer suicidal. Everyone gets what they want. And that is something that's really fascinating about the end of the movie. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen in the sequel. So we'll have to wait and see. I don't want to speculate on it because I haven't seen it. But anyway, as for the movie itself, again, it's wonderfully amazing. The movie, when it came out, did pretty well, right? It did pretty well. It had an opening weekend of $8,030,897. And then it went on to gross $74 million, almost $75 million in North America alone. It was actually the 10th highest grossing film of 1988. Critically speaking, it was pretty well received. It has an 85% in Rotten Tomatoes. And it did get a B on CinemaScore. And I think now it would get an A+. But back then it gave a B. And this goes to show you that like movies can evolve over time. The reception to them can evolve over time. And we're inundated with so much media these days that it's very difficult to not look at something like that and go, yeah, like, stuff you will not always be the same person you were every time you watch a movie. And that's one of the reasons why it works, why movies are an evolving medium. Even movies made 50 years ago can speak to people differently at different points in time. Look at the movie Network, right? The whole I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. That was done in 1976. That movie turns 50 in 2 years. And that scene, that rant, that anger, that frustration, that rage, guess what? It lives on today. It's still relevant today, nearly a half century later. That should tell you everything you need to know about movies. Is they can hit you at different times and do different things, and that's why they're great. Look, Beetlejuice as a whole, I love it. I love it. It's such a fun movie. I can't wait to watch it again with my kids. I love the movie. I can't wait to watch it again with my family. I can't wait to go see the sequel. This is one that is a classic. It's an absolute classic. As always, I want to hear your thoughts, your opinions. Let me know. Thank you guys very much for listening to this ramble about Beetlejuice. My name, of course, is Matt Jarbo. This has been PODIO Commentary. If you want to support the channel, support the show, support what I do, you guys can sponsor an episode. Head on over to patreon.com/Matt Jarbo or contact me on Twitter at Hwad Podcast, HWAD Podcast. And we'll talk again soon. Thank you guys very much. Have yourself a great day. Go watch Beetlejuice. Love it again. Love it lots. See you guys later. Bye.